Lord, Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for your grace and mercy. We thank you for the privilege of being your children and your people. We especially thank you, Lord, for the call that you've given us to be your witnesses, and thank you that you prepared us to do such. Pray that you gathered our discussion now, that what we say be for your building up of your church, the expanding of your kingdom. In your Son's name we pray. Amen. Amen. The Bible's, I don't just want this to be a presentation about going to Guatemala, but I want to have a semblance of Bible study as well. And so there's going to be three verses that we're going to be looking at, which kind of serve as a backdrop of the Bible study as well, the presentation. The first is Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10. Now, many of you are, as good Lutherans, we know Ephesians 2, 8 to 9 very well. For by grace you've been saved through faith, not of works, lest any man should boast. But then what comes next is interesting. For we are his workmanship, created for good works, prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. Now, some of you guys have heard me share this story before, and some of my other stories I'm going to tell, but I know it's been a while, and I know I forget as well. This idea of prepared beforehand that you should walk in them. It's interesting. I tell people that my walk to Guatemala really began when I was in 7th grade, and at that point I had no idea that was going to be a part of the story. And the reason why I say that is because when I was in 7th grade, we had some people who came into the school. They came in, did a language aptitude test to study, see how able people are to learn a foreign language. And they came back to me a few days later and said, "Steve, don't even think about studying a foreign language. You have to study really hard just to get a C, and so save yourself the hassle." In retrospect, what I'm wondering is, okay, they gave this test to us when we were in 7th grade, telling a teenager what not to do. And so you kind of wonder if what there was kind of reverse psychology. But all through high school, I studied Spanish. And the lowest grade I ever got was an A-. So I should have done. But also, I figured that when I went to college, I was on track to become a pastor, and it was required to study Greek and Hebrew. And I said, if they're going to make me learn it, I want to learn it well. So that was my major in college as well as the biblical languages. I didn't do as well as I did in Spanish, but did okay. But the interesting thing was between high school and seminary, which for me was a period of 7 years, I really didn't do much with my Spanish at all. I'm sure you've all heard the phrase, when it comes to languages, use it or lose it. But I didn't use it and I didn't lose it. So I thought maybe this was God's way of saying this was something that he wanted me to do. And so the people from the seminary, or from the synod came in, and they said, those of you who would like to have a Hispanic vicarage, come and meet in a certain place at a certain time, and we're going to talk about it. I attended that meeting. And I can't remember exactly how everything went down. What I remember telling them was, I would like to be in a position where I would really have to learn the language. And what they took that to mean was I was willing to go overseas. And about a couple weeks later, I got a phone call from them, and they asked, "Are you still willing to go overseas?" I was thinking, did I say that? But I said, yeah, I would be. And Coincidentally, I was going to visit a friend of mine who did his DCE internship in the Bahamas, and I didn't tell my mom and dad about this conversation until I came back from the Bahamas, because I didn't want to. But eventually they found out, and they came down for the placement for vicarage. And because of the uniqueness of my placement, when I was placed to go down to Guatemala, or placed on my vicarage, I knew where I was going to be going. Most of my cohorts had no idea. And so, some of them, when they were told where they're going, oohs and ahs were like, ooh, they're going off to California for their vicarage. Some of them were a little more ha-ha, they're going to North Dakota. When they told me, they announced I was going to Zacapa, Guatemala, I had the most mixed. There were some that said, ooh, he's going to Guatemala. There were some who said, he's going to Guatemala. But that's how it all began. And I really think it began in 7th grade when I was told, don't even think about studying a foreign language. But there's another term that was used there, and that was, you are his workmanship, created for good works. And I brought some things here, which are one of the things, if you go to a lot of foreign countries, Central America in particular, they have all kinds of interesting little doodads that you can buy as souvenirs. You guys all pay this up as you can. Believe it or not, this is pottery. It's painted in, and this is another fun thing for the kids. But this thing is called a tejido, and you'll see these all over the place in Guatemala. And I know some can know what it says. What does it say?
It says Massey.
That's yeah. Dios? God bless this. God bless this home. God bless this home. And then you see at the bottom it says Massey. I'll come into that a little bit later. But that's a beautiful thing about the Lord and His church, is that we have all these different type of things which all can be said to be His handiwork, but all of them are different. And some of them they have different functions, different roles, and that's the same for each and every one of us as well. God has created each and every one of us, and not all of us do the same thing. But at the same time, in the church, there are many things that need to be done, and God has created us specially in a way so that we can do what He's prepared us to do. I'd like to continue then with the call of Abram in Genesis chapter 12. And this by some is called the Great Commission of the Old Testament. And this is going to be verses 2 and 3. I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and curse those who curse you. All the people on the earth will be blessed through you. What's interesting about this is it shows a little bit of Hebrew poetry and how it works. If you were to study this and look at it closely, you would notice that there are 7 blessings or 7 promises that God makes to Abram. In Hebrew poetry, the most important blessing, or everything that's pointing towards, is the middle. You see this same thing in the Psalms. When you read a psalm which has odd number of verses, look to what the middle verse is. So if it has 17 verses, look at verse 9. That's a key point they're trying to make. And as you look at this, the middle one, the middle promise was, you will be a blessing. That's what God calls each and every one of us to be. God calls each and every one of us to be a blessing. And before this, he said, go to the place where I will show you. Now those of you who know Abram's story know that he was called to go out. This is the second time he was called to go out. The first time he was called, remember where he lived? When he first was called out, he lived in Ur. And then he went about halfway there. He got to Haran. And that comes later in the story, in the history, because remember when Isaac was ready to have a wife, he said, don't stay here. Go back to the family which lives in Haran. Also, when Jacob left town because Esau was hot on his trail, he also went back to Haran to find a wife. So he was called twice. The first time he didn't quite go all the way that God wanted him to go, and so he needed to be called again. It also shows us, God, even though we may make a mistake somewhere along the line, God still has us in mind and can still use us in spite of ourselves sometimes. But I want to go back to placement day when I was found out I was going to be going to Guatemala. Really a story of two parents. As some of you may know, my dad used to be a policeman. And as a policeman, sometimes they're what they said was kind of fun and interesting. And one of the things Dad told me was, well, first of all, he asked, Steve, are you sure you want to go down to Guatemala for your vicarage? I said, yeah, I think it would be a good experience. And they said, but just don't come back with a hot tamale. My mom, on the other hand, was a little more spiritual, and she said, Steve, a long time ago, I learned that I had to give you over to the Lord. And that you're in God's hands, and that God will provide for you. And so I went down to Guatemala, went to Zacapa. Over here you see a map of Guatemala. There's two crosses on it, a green one and a red one. You can see that once you leave. The green one is where I went on my vicarage. The red one is where we're going to now. If you have any little crosses, I need to get another one to mark where Marco was born, which was just outside of Guatemala City, in one of the suburbs called Misco, which is about an hour from where we were born. But I did my vicarage in Zacapa. My first 3 months there, I lived in the town of Antigua, which is a colonial town. People from all over the world come to Antigua, Guatemala, because it's maintained its colonial atmosphere. The streets are still cobblestone. And what amazed me when I was down there were the ladies who would walk in high heels on this cobblestone. I had no idea how they could do it. But also the structure, the buildings maintain that culture. And as you go around the town, you'll see that at its heyday, it really was the religious center of that region. Because there are some of them are in ruins, some of them have been restored, but there are 25 churches in this town, and it's about a mile square, or square mile. And so there are 25 churches in there. And amongst them, there were also 4 monasteries and 3 convents. Wow! And, some of the churches were with those places, but yeah, the Catholic Church was king, and it was that way there in Antigua. And those who know Spanish know what Antigua means. Old. You get the word antique from it. And the reason why it's called old is because there's a volcano that was right there. It's called Volcán de Agua. for those of you who know what agua means, it plays into the story. This volcano erupted, and the lake that was up at the top, or the agua that was up, came down, and it wiped out two towns. One which is now called Ciudad Vieja, which was the political capital of the area, and Santiago de Caballeros, which we now call Antigua, which was a religious capital or center. And this happened about the same time that the United States was in the early stages of thinking about becoming a nation. Wiped out the towns, but they stayed there for a little bit, and about a month or two later, it erupted again. And what wasn't destroyed the first time was destroyed the second time, and the people said, we got to get out of here. And they moved from that area to what is now Guatemala's capital, Guatemala City. And it's there that I studied Spanish, and I also climbed up a couple volcanoes. For the pastor who was there at the time, his son was an avid hiker, and he said, Steve, let's hike up a couple volcanoes. So I hiked up Acatenango and Fuego. Fuego is a little more ominous than the others. And you know what the word fuego means?
Fire.
Fire. And the reason why they call it that is because every now and then you see steam coming up. That's what came up when I was there. And I hiked up to the top of those, and the unfortunate thing was it was a cloudy day, so I didn't get to see the beautiful overlook, nor was I able to see the steam that came up from the vent. Last year, Fuego did something. You may have heard about it in the news. It erupted, and it wiped out the villages which were right at the edge of it. I was talking with a gentleman who worked at the hotel, who lived in one of those villages, and he said that 10 meters or 30 feet of ash fell on his village. That's, for us, that's unfathomable. When I talk with people in Michigan and Illinois, I said, just imagine that, we got crippled with 3 feet of snow fall down. Imagine 30 feet of ash. And as you can imagine, villages were buried and people needed to be relocated. But getting a little ahead of myself with that. But when I was there on Vicarage, just before I came back, I commissioned some of these tejidos to be made. And this one I had made for my parents. And you guess. I also had one made for my home church back in Michigan, which is kind of interesting because they still have it there right by the doorway. But you tell them that it's there, they say, oh. They just walk right by, how things become hard to back off, you never really notice it. But I also have one made at the seminary. But the people, it's interesting, the people who made these tejidos are the people of Santiago Zamora, where I'll be going to serve. And so this past year, I had a conversation with the people there, and the conversation basically was we want to have a Bible study because we haven't had a pastor for 7 years. I kind of had an inkling that what was happening here was there was kind of a sense of a courtship taking place. See if I would fit with them, and if I thought that they would fit with me. So during Advent last year, we through the modern technology had a series of Bible studies made possible through Skype. And while I was there, I I showed them the Tahito, and they said, "Oh yeah, I remember making that." So it's interesting that that connection from when I did my vicarage 30 years ago to what's about to happen now. Let me show you a little bit about Santiago Zamora. Santiago Zamora has a school. It's well, before I get to that, it does have a school, but it also has a church. When I was there in my vicarage, there was a missionary named Ozier who began reaching out to the people in this village, which in the history of the Church of Guatemala was historic. Because up to that point, all the churches were working among people who were Ladino, who was a Mexican or a Guatemalan and European blend. There was no work being done among the indigenous population of Guatemala. And so, the thing is kind of interesting though, his name is Edmundo in Spanish, Edmundo Ozier, and the name of the church ended up being Redentor del Mundo. That's one thing I do. Mundo. But the church began, and since that time, there's also a school that's resulted. Right now, it's in hiatus because missionaries many times come with great intentions, but don't always dot their I's and cross their T's properly. And so the paperwork needed to be redone in order for the school to begin functioning. So they needed to close the school down to do that. As things like that happen, similar things happen here in the United States. They realize, the school is not up to code either, and so they have to be closed again this year as they remodel the school so that it's up to code. But these are the students, or some of the students are there, and right now what they're doing is an after-school program, to keep contact and connection with the community. The school is not a bilingual school, it's a trilingual school. And I know you can probably guess two of the three languages that are taught there. What do you think they are?
English and Spanish.
English and Spanish. And the third is an indigenous language called Cachiquel. And notice I didn't try to get you guys to guess that. You know that from your history lessons that there were three great indigenous civilizations here in Americas before Columbus. The Aztecs in Mexico, the Mayans in Central America, and the Incas in Peru. But the question, one of the great mysteries is what happened to the Mayans? Why did it disappear? And a lot of different people have different theories of how it happened, but it happened, and we don't really know how. But even though the civilization disintegrated, the people remained. And there are three major language groups or culture groups that developed from the Mayans: the Cachiquel, the Mam, and the Quiche. And one of the people I'll be working with are from the Cachiquel branch. That being said, one of the things which made it difficult for Guatemala to organize afterwards was that there were 30 different languages in Guatemala, or there are 30 different languages in Guatemala. There are these indigenous languages. And so there's three schools or three languages are taught. And this is, you see the dress there? That's what I was talking about before, that the descendants of the Maya and the people who are here mainly come from the Cachiquel branch. one thing that plays out for me is that I will be learning enough Kachikel basically to say, hi, how you doing? How's the weather? Where's the bathroom? Things like that. They function very well in Spanish, and so that's the predominant language that would be working with. But also you'll see that the attire of the people is very colorful. Introduced this a little bit a little bit ago, was that the volcano and the mission trips. One of the things which makes Santiago picturesque is I can get up on top of the roof where they have the pastor's house, and I'll sit in a chair and I look one direction, I see two volcanoes. I look in another direction, I see another volcano. So it's very beautiful, and there's 12 coffee plantations around there too, so I'll be able to, and believe it or not, I now drink coffee. Marcos asked, why are you drinking coffee, Daddy? And I said, well, I got to fit into the culture. And I figured if I could take the bitterness of an IPA beer, then I could take the bitterness of coffee. But the volcano will actually have an aspect of the ministry as well, because one of the aspects, or one part of my ministry will be going to one of the village, I believe it's called Alotaderngo, where those who were displaced by the volcano were settled. Most of them have now gone on and living with family in different places or found jobs in different locations, but there's still 20, 30 families that remain. And the church has a ministry there where they go there with have Bible study once a week or once a month or something. That will be part of my ministry as well. So you're seeing the hats that are being placed on. There also, every now and then, there'll be a mission group that comes down from the States. There's a mission agency called Most Ministries, which is Mission Opportunity Short Term. And they'll come down for a week and do Bible study. Some will be more medical inclined, some will be English as second language, some will be vacation Bible school, but people come down for a week and help the ministry down there.
When we collect the eyeglasses, and they go to most ministries, and when they go collect it for short term, they will have eyeglass clinics, and they're able to use the eyeglasses that we collect. So it's important, people, that we continue to do that on an ongoing basis here at St. Paul.
And even what they'll do when they do the testing, there's basically three classes of people that result. Those who don't need glasses, to them they'll give sunglasses just so they get something, and also because sun is pretty strong there, so even though they don't necessarily need glasses, the sunglasses will help them. Also, there are those who can be helped with the classes that are there. But then there's also people who need more attention, like they have cataracts and things like that. But that's one avenue of ministry that people come down. And so that they'll also have some interfacing with them. I found it kind of interesting that last week I was up in Carson City, Nevada, and the reason I was there was because sometime mid-June I got a friend request from a guy who was a pastor who was down in Santiago Zamora the week before, and he heard that we're going to be getting a pastor from this is his name, and so he befriended me, and then last week I went up there to make a further connection with them. There's a church in Michigan. For those who know the Midwest Lutheran church history, Frankenmuth, St. Lawrence. That's some other church in the Midwest. And they're going to be having a group come down to Guatemala a week after I get there. And I told them, still wet behind the ears. And so that's another aspect of it, interfacing with the mission trips that come down. And this is going to be leading to another aspect of Lead a Child. Lead a Child is a ministry which began as it was called Children's Christians Concerned Society. And you can see that's a mouthful. But we began in Guatemala, in Zacapa, where I did my vicarage. There were agricultural missionaries who came down, and they saw the really deplorable situation of education in Guatemala at the time. Many people in the villages, didn't really have a functioning school. If they did have a functioning school, many of the students, it was a question: is it more important to be a student or to survive? Because the children had jobs to do. The boys would go out and collect the firewood so that the mothers could cook, or to keep the house warm if necessary. The girls would help with the cleaning around the house and carrying the corn to the mill to be ground so they could make their tortillas. And many times that took precedence over education. And so they saw that situation. They said, we need to do something to help out. And what they did was they built a boarding school next to the Lutheran school, which was in Zacapa. And people from different areas around Guatemala would come and study there. By the time I arrived, people were also coming from nearby countries, El Salvador and Honduras, to be students there. Nowadays, the education is much better and more of a priority for people. But Lead a Child remains, and I'll talk about that a little bit. Notice those are similar to the tejido that was made there. They were taking those. They made those for all their supporters, and so when Dr. Frusti goes and visits with churches which support them, he'll take one of those tejidos and say thank you for your support.
Say that word again.
Tejido. T-E-J-I-D-O. In Spanish, the letter J makes a H sound. One last thing. These are two of the school leaders. Marlene is the one here. She's the director of the school. We're really blessed, because there aren't a lot of Lutherans in Guatemala. But our leadership there are both Lutheran. She's when I was at my vicarage 25 years ago, she was just a little kid, and now she's and besides being the director, she's also bilingual, and so she's able to talk with Marco, and he doesn't feel all alone. But notice as well what they have there. There's a little computer lab. That's new. There's a gentleman who came in from LA this year, and I believe there's like 30 computers there. And he wired it up and got it all connected and everything. One of the things that gets Marco excited about that, internet. And so we will have internet, available, which in this little village of Santiago Zamora, which in many ways is, 80, 90 years back in history, they do have internet connection. Karen is a daughter of the congregation, and notice she's dressed in the indigenous dress, so she's trilingual. She served as one of the translators when groups come into, but the two of them are kind of a team for the leadership of the school there in Santiago, Sonora.
How many students in the school?
Well, like I said, last year it was more after-school program. But the truth of the matter was, it helped the attendance, because there were 40 to 60 students who would come after school for assistance. We'll see how that translates once the school gets back up and running. So that's the place where we'll be going. But now I want to talk about another verse, because that's in Hebrews chapter 10. Hebrews 10, 23 to 26, I think, or 25. Let's hold fast unswervingly to the hope we profess, for he who promises faithful. Let us consider how we can spur one another towards good works, or loving good works. Let us not give up and meeting together as the habit of some, but let us encourage one another, and all the more as you see the day approach. You'll notice in the pamphlet that I gave you, in the bulletin, that there is, I call it the players. The first we talked about already, that's the church in Santiago. I told you that I was leading those Bible studies during Advent, and during Valentine's Day week, I was down in Guatemala visiting that church and other churches throughout Guatemala. I preached on Sunday for them. That evening they had a special meal, thanking me and everything. But then at the end of that meal, they made us a request. And the request was, "We'd like you to be our pastor." And it's always humbling to be asked to be a pastor, because none of us deserve this position, but it's God calls us to that position. When they called me to be their pastor, they said, this is what we can offer you. We can offer you a place to stay. We can also offer you 100 quetzales a month. To put that in perspective, for each dollar that you give somebody to go for exchange, what you get in return are 7 quetzales. So we could offer you $14 a month. Basically, $14 and change. And obviously that's not going to support. And so other people got involved with that. One of them was Lead a Child. The interesting thing once again, connections and how God was preparing things in the past. When I was in college, I was on the track team, and I ran the 4x4. I was the third leg ran the third quarter, 400 meters, and the person I handed the baton off to was Dr. Phil Frusti at the time, but now he's Dr. Phil Frusti, the executive director of Lead a Child. And the last time Marco and I were there together was 4 years ago, when I served as his translator in another village in Guatemala, or town in Guatemala called Bolan. And so we have a little history together, and he said, Massey's a guy. He gave me one of the best compliments I've received in a long time. He said, Steve is the most Guatemalan American I know. And for you guys, sometimes that's, you know what that meant, because I'm not the typical pastor. But always had that mission, you know, with that idea that we need to reach out in the community. And so Lita Child called me to be a missionary, called me as missionary serving as congregational pastor. And the reason why they could do that is because they are a registered service organization, a recognized service organization, an RSO of Missouri Synod. LWML really isn't, but they're an auxiliary of it. So they're kind of the premium. But most ministry is another RSO, and there's plenty of them. There's one in I think it's called Fronteras, which is serving in border ministry in our district along Tijuana.
Yeah.
There's another one in El Paso called Isleta. But they're able to call a pastor or a missionary or any called word person. But the reality with them as well is that they can call, but they really don't have the funds to do it. And so now there are two entities that call me, which really financially can't support me. And so that's where the third player comes in, and that's called Global Lutheran Outreach. And you'll notice in your bulletin there's an envelope. They're the ones who really are home base for the missionaries. When I went out as a vicar 30 plus years ago, today's a week, Sunday, thank you, because the position of vicar was one of the projects of the LWM, and so they supported they funded that position for me. At the end of the 1900s, there came a change in policy within our Missouri Synod. And at that time, almost all the missionaries were called back to the United States. And since
that happen now?
It was in the 1900s. I can't remember the exact year. Or early 2000s.
Oh, early 2000s.
But they were all called back. When they went back, they said, no longer will you receive your salary through the Board of Commissioned Services. Now you need to raise your own funds. And so now, when missionaries go back and go out to the field, they have to do what I'm doing right now. But my brother also worked for the state police, and he kind of had the same type of, used the same language as my dad. He says, so you're out begging $3. In a sense, that's true, but I don't like to use that word. But the money is funneled through them. The other thing Glow does is that they are the connecting point. There's a missionary who wants to serve someplace, and there's a national church that says we need a worker. And so the Church of Santiago Zamora said we need a worker. And the reason, I don't know if I really played into this or elaborated this. They've been without a pastor for 7 years. And they don't have the ability, like we do in the United States, to call a pastor, because basically in Guatemala, when a pastor is placed, they will begin and they will end their ministry at that location. When I was on my vicarage, there was a guy by the name of David Rodriguez, who was pastor in the city church, Guatemala City, of Cristo Rey. He's still the pastor there today. So when they're placed, that's where they stay. and they don't have other pastors who can step in. That pastor did help out at this church once a month. He would come in and bring communion and lead worship for them. But essentially they were like sheep without a shepherd. And so that's how they said, we need a pastor, and I was presented as a person who could fill that position. So they make that connecting point. The other thing they do, as I said, is they help as home base. One is the funding, also publicity. If you get on the website, you'll see that it say that I'm one of the missionaries, and then there's some information about me there. And so those are the players in this call. And one thing I tell people that please don't just put $20 or put money in the envelope and say it's nice seeing you today. We want to support your ministry. I want you to take the envelope home. I want you to pray about it, because as you do so, if you are moved by the Lord to help support me, then really you're more part of the team than if you just give me some money, then forget about it. Because unless the Lord builds the house, those who labor in vain.
Can I ask, does the Synod help you with health insurance, or how is that?
That's another thing which comes through. That's part of the GLOW, is that they have I will be getting health insurance through them.
You will be.
Right. Marco too.
Yeah, that's what I'm concerned about.
I have two questions, Pastor. Karen and Marty, do they get paid too, or do they get a salary, or?
Yeah.
And also, how are your accommodations over there?
I left my phone over there. They have a pastor's house, and it's going to be a tiny house living. But it looks really nice. When you look at the pictures of what they've done, it looks very nice. But it's probably, the room is probably, if we were to close those accordion doors, probably about half the size of that room, and then a second level with everything. So when we moved from Aurora, we got rid of a lot of stuff. Yeah, right now we're planning on doing is taking eight 17-gallon crates down, and about 10 boxes of books down, and a couple of pieces of furniture and a TV, and that's my life's possessions now.
What would your budget be as far as how much you need to live comfortably?
Looking at $60,000 I need to raise. And look, saying that salary wise, $2,500 a month.
$2,500.
$2,500 a month. And then others for insurance and other things like that.
So the monies go to
Correct. Go to Global Lutheran Outreach.
yeah, and then they disperse it.
And how much of that, what percentage do you get?
90%.
90?
Yeah, they keep a little bit for, which, if I were to go on as a LCMS missionary, I would be needing to raise over $100,000, and about a quarter of that would go to
Really?
reserves. Well, a larger percentage would go to.
What does Marco think of all this? Who does he care? It's just another...
Well, the word that I use with him is he's anxious.
He says he doesn't want to learn any Spanish. I said, what are you talking about? I said, you know some Spanish. Nuh-uh.
Yeah, he's concerned about the language aspect. He's concerned about the food. The food's gonna be a lot different.
What kind of food is it then?
If you go to, there's a restaurant on Thomas, on 75th, Salvadoreño. It's similar to, it's different from Mexican, but it's more similar to Salvadoreño.
So you're gonna grow stock in Kraft mac and cheese?
But one of the reasons why I could accept this call to going down there is because of where we're living. Because I mentioned earlier about Antigua being a very touristy town. There's also, because of that, there's a lot of expatriates. There's also a lot of international business. And so that means there's also American-style schools. And so when he graduates from high school, his diploma will be recognized at a university in the United States. And that's something you wouldn't necessarily, if I were to have that, we would need to separate. But this way we can we'll stay together.
Will he go to the school that you'll be at?
No, he'll be going to a different school.
A different school because of going to the 6th grade. Okay.
Well, Marcos likes water. Is the ocean close?
Ocean is an hour away. There is a water park also. There's 2 other water parks, probably 3 and 4 hours away. And the one, I gotta tell this. Joel, you'll be the one who gets it. When I went down there, I love to abuse the language. And make very fun of it. So there was a water park called Valle Dorado, which means Golden Valley. And I said, yo fui de Valle Dorado y salí de Valle Quemado. Which means I went to the Golden Valley and came out of the valley sunburned.
Will you have a vehicle?
We'll get one when we get down there.
I see.
Yeah. And there's a lady who is, Yuri is her name, and she is very helpful. And she's already shown me some pictures of different vehicles. She asked me what kind of vehicle do I want. Basically, I would say I want high enough so I can go over the speed bumps that they have, or if I need to go to the villages, get through the terrain that I have to cover.
When do you figure you'll be going down?
The plan is November 1st. Soon. And why November 1st? Well, both ends. Marco wanted to have one more bounce for Halloween. He's hilarious. So he gets his candy, and he still has that candy by the time New Year's Eve comes. And so after a while, I just chuck it. But, after the chocolate. and on the other end too, it's for those who saw the movie Coco. November 2nd is a very important day of the dead, and people will go to the graveyards. They'll have picnics out there. And in Guatemala, they do a little interesting thing too. At least in this one village, Pongo, they fly kites, and some of these kites are taller than this room. And the idea, though, the kites represent their prayers. And the higher it gets, the more important the saint who will then carry their prayers to Jesus. Well, when I went to Supango, I saw something which I swore I was in a Mel Brooks movie. There's a guy dressed completely in orange, walking around the graveyard, like, hot dogs.
The weather,
Yeah.
is it tropical?
About the climate.
We're going to be living in the high. Guatemala has 4 climates. Coastal is hot and humid. The rainforest, hot and even more humid. The valley, you guys know what that is. Because when I told people when I did my vicarage, I tell them it's like living in Phoenix without air conditioning. They now have air conditioning.
Oh.
When I lived there were basically two places which had air conditioning: the banks and the telephone companies.
Shopping centers.
But then there's the Highlands where I'll be living. The Highlands, because Guatemala is very mountainous. In fact, the majority of the people live in the Highlands, and there they call it the Eternal Spring, Latena Primavera. And it's when I did my language training in Antigua, if it got below 75, the people were complaining how cold it was. If it got over 85, they were complaining how hot it was. But during the winter, during January, December, and February, it can get cold. In the Highlands, every year there are people who die because of the cold. You know, it may only be 20, 30 degrees, but the difference is they don't have, Zacapa didn't have air conditioning. These guys don't have central heating either. And so when the temperature is outside, it's what it is inside as well. So we bought a couple of electric blankets.
But you have all the modern conveniences like stove, refrigerator, all that.
Yes.
Bathrooms.
We'll have running water, we'll have electricity. It may not be necessarily as reliable as the United States, but the high heat, sometimes our stuff goes out as well. And the same thing with the internet. It may not be as reliable as here, but we'll have it. In fact, I'll be able to go to Guatemala City and shop at Sam's Club or Walmart if I want to. And stock up on mac and cheese.
For sure.
Well, thank you very much.
Will your phones work?
I'll have to get a new phone. It'll work.
An international?
Because right now, one of the apps I have is called WhatsApp. And I'm in contact with Nuri on a regular basis.
We'll still be able to converse on Facebook.
Facebook as well. Yeah, the nice thing about modern technology is that the world is a lot smaller than it used to be. Through things like that. Well, it's now 10:15. Thank you for your.
So are you allowed to get courses that aren't Lutheran? Are you allowed to go to churches?
Yeah,
Do other churches want to also?
they can. But I go to where people I know. And so, but yeah, whoever wants to support me, hey, but thanks. That's a good question. Any other questions? Thank you very much. It was great being back with you guys, and look forward to next time.
Amen.
Let's close in prayer. The Lord and Heavenly Father, we thank you for your grace. We thank you for your presence. We thank you for the ministry that you've set before us. Lord, it's not every day that somebody comes who's going to a foreign mission field, but help us remember always that the mission field is right next to us. There are the people who you brought into our lives. They may be our Jerusalem, people who believe and confess the same way we do. They may be our Judea, where we have to go out a little further to minister with them. They may be Samaria, who make us uncomfortable. And also, Lord, remember us when we go on our travels, that we are also called to be your witnesses. Be with us as we go out as your people, knowing that you always go before us. In your son's name we pray. Amen.